this kind of knowledge, which is probably trapped in many decades and years of evolution, you need to really be able to understand those nuances before you can really develop products for the future. This is not something that you will learn in a classroom or attending an online course. This is years of work. And so part of our challenge is how do you bring those elements of learning into our GCC? And that's really what makes it most interesting. Value is defined by who in the company. And a lot of times, what we think is of high value to us may or may not be what is valuable to our customers. So I think we need to sort of, on the company side, really figure out what drives value. And then the second thing is, I think in GCCs, we need to go very close to where that value is being generated. It's absolutely okay for people to jump from one discipline to the other discipline. I think get that exposure. Broaden your exposure. As you become specialists, obviously you'll deepen. But there's nothing wrong in understanding different ways of looking at the same particular problem.
Hello and welcome to another episode of GCC Unplugged, where real leaders share raw insights. And today's conversation is particularly interesting because we are speaking to a leader who sits at the intersection of engineering excellence, digital innovation, and global enterprise transformation. Joining us is Nanda K, Lakkaraju, Managing Director of Career Technologies India Limited. Nanda, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me here, Saurabh.
So, Nanda, we talk to a lot of leaders and, they talk about GCC leadership both as a career path and a capability builder. What's your take on this one?
I'll be quite honest with you. When I started my journey, I've been with Career now for about 30 years, and GCC wasn't a term that we had back then. I spent the first 28 years of my career, in the businesses. In the last 2 years, I've been here in GCC. I can tell you one thing for sure. I think they are a phenomenal experience to kind of go through. To be part of a GCC story, you really get exposed to various aspects of the business under one roof. So in a way, you can see a lot of things that are happening in the company, within the confines of the GCC. And depending on which company you are in, sort of, you could have different functions. In our case, while we started off as an engineering center, we have a very large digital team. We also have a very large finance team. We have very large, shared services and HR teams, and we have a very growing supply chain team. So in a way, you do get to interact with different functions and different geographies. What's happening in the Americas, what's happening in Europe, what's happening in Asia, and I think they all come together in GCC. It's a phenomenal learning experience from that standpoint. And I think you talked a little bit about what one would aspire or how you shape your journey. I think what really helps is, I think today the word GCC is a lot more prevalent, but I would say that I'm sure that a number of fellow GCC leaders might have started their journey in something that's very different from what GCC was.
Yes. So. Yeah, no, I'm sure. I hear that story that this is not how it was, 10 years back, 20 years back when they joined. So tell us about Career's journey briefly, how it started here and how it evolved in the same breath.
So Career actually, our GCC here in Hyderabad became part of Career in 2010. But even many years prior to that, it was part of our GE security business. So there were about 75, 80 people back in 2010 when it became part of our erstwhile parent, United Technologies. And they were heavy on some of the engineering work, on some of the cloud work, and on the embedded systems work. And I think over the years, we have had different businesses become part of it, different product lines became part of it, and different functions became part of it. So we grew essentially from our engineering roots, closer to product, closer to technology, then branching out into digital, branching out into finance, and branching out into supply chain now. And as the company continued to grow and evolve, so has Hyderabad. I think we are now what I would call as a Hyderabad 3.0. We were Hyderabad 1.0 because our origins was a lot in our fire and security product. In 2023, after I took over, we pivoted more towards our HVAC and refrigeration products. And now we are actively shaping our future directions in terms of how you drive value and how you drive transformations.
Right. No, I see a lot of functions getting added very recently, and you also talked about. Tell us how intrinsic are those to the global enterprise?
See, number one, whichever area you're in, I believe you need to really have good, strong domain knowledge in that. Let's take engineering for example. You could have various products that are being developed or being handled in the GCC, but it's very rare that you do everything related to that particular product inside one center. You could have multiple centers in the world all working together to really develop these large products of today. And so it's important for you to have a much more holistic view of the industry that you are in, the work that you're doing, the details of the product. And some of these industries and products were built over decades of hard work.
Correct.
So I think we need to approach this whole space with a degree of respect that it deserves, saying that, look, we need to learn a lot more about it. And I think as we begin to understand more, as we begin to interact with the world, then you can actually start working more on the specific areas that you have. So I think I'm a big believer in understanding sort of your basic domain area before you can really drive value. I think to start with, a lot of us were really doing more transactional type of work. That means some work packet would be given to you and you would go execute that particular work packet. And I think that was the extent of the, sort of the inputs and outputs were far simpler. But now, if you said, look, are we doing for example, are we having the right approach towards a particular product, or are we having the right strategy? I think you need to know a lot more about the business. You need to know a lot more about the customer. You need to know a lot more about the domain. And I think that journey, is not something that can happen overnight. It is capability building that takes years to really work. I'll give you like maybe one anecdote. It's got nothing to do with GCCs, by the way. This was, I think, back in 2004. We were trying to develop a commercial, think of it like a commercial fridge, like a commercial refrigerator. The ones that you go into supermarkets and you open and you reach out and you get ice creams and frozen food, etc. So we thought we were building, the next generation of that particular case. And we thought we had it all figured out. We thought we were completely ready with a particular design. And at that time, my supervisor, and I was one of my really good mentors, he said, look, Nanda, why don't you go and get 4 of the most vocal technicians out there who have an opinion on what the product should look like and bring them together. So this 2004, it was near Dallas, and we got the people together, and I got 4 of these technicians. And for the first 15 minutes, and we had the old cabinet and we had the prototype new cabinet, gave everybody post-it notepads, and said, for the first 15 minutes, you cannot speak.
Okay.
You can see, and whatever you don't like, you can put a sticker on it, but you cannot speak. In about 15 minutes, this case had about 138 odd stickers. It had like the measles on it. And while the engineers thought that they had figured everything out and that this case was ready, the folks said, look, these are all the things that were not ready. I don't have to go into specifics, but I'll give you one small example. We thought the bigger the glass door, the better the case, because, you can see
What's
more
there
of the
inside,
product. And so our competition had a certain height and we had a certain height. So we thought we'll make it a very tall case. It turns out that our case was 85 inches tall.
Okay.
And we thought bigger is better. Why not? And the service person came and told me, hey, Chief, how do you plan to get an 85-inch case to a doorway that is only 84 inches tall? Because 2/3 of our market was really replacement market.
Correct.
They're not going to put, new stores have 8-foot doors.
Yeah.
The old stores have 7-foot doors, which is 84 inches. So this kind of knowledge, which is probably trapped in many decades and years of evolution, you need to really be able to understand those nuances before you can really develop products for the future.
Right.
This is not something that you will learn in a classroom or attending an online course. This is years of work. And so part of our challenge is how do you bring those elements of learning into our GCC? And that's really what makes it most interesting.
Yeah, right. No, definitely. I mean, the more you learn, the more you evolve, the better products would come out. And on the same vein, I would like to understand from you, that then what does a value-oriented GCC look like, in practical terms, in terms of talent, in terms of transition, in terms of technology?
So the first question that would come to my mind, Saurabh, is value is defined by who in the company, and a lot of times what we think is of high value to us may or may not be what is valuable to our customers. So I think we need to sort of, on the company side, right, really figure out what drives value. And then the second thing is, I think in GCCs we need to go very close to where that value is being generated. So I'll give you, for example, if you are, let's say, developing software for a selling tool, or if you're developing a particular product, I think there's nothing that substitutes you having that direct first line contact with either the user or the folks who are interacting with the users. So you really minimize the amount of lost in translation type of work. And I think the closer we really get our people towards it, better. We may not have factories in GCCs. For example, our factories could be several hundred miles away, or maybe in a different continent. But what can we do? For example, in Hyderabad, our factory in India is in Gurgaon, and our factories globally are in different places. But we have many, many buildings here which run our product.
Right.
So what is stopping us? So therefore, we take it upon us to make sure that most of our engineers are spending days and times with our service engineers, with our product. It's not just about seeing your product in the lab, but how is it really
the
working
real
in real life. And I think the closer you get to that particular area, you will be able to understand which value portions you're going to do better. Otherwise, just kind of executing off of our requirements.
right.
I think that's important. I don't discount that, but I think
That's
it's
the
important to
start.
understand
Yeah.
the why. And I think and engineers by nature are more curious. So I think it'll be important to make sure that they are fully aware of what's going on. Same way, if you have got digital teams or other teams for that matter, right? A lot of times you could have things that are lost in the handoffs that happen from one function to the other. When a customer really buys a product from us, they buy it for us, for our brand, and for what we stand behind it. So whatever happens within the company, they are not really so much interested. So therefore, I think it's important to really drive value in the eyes of the customer. And I think if you keep that, a lot of the internal squabbles will also be removed.
No, correct. You're absolutely. And one cannot just be support services anymore. You have to deliver products. You have to deliver, platforms. And seeing those things working in real world, it gives you more understanding of the wear and tear that happens, and the changes probably required to adapt to those conditions. Having said that, how do we change this product, thinking mindset within a global delivery organization? How do we inculcate that?
So the first thing is there is no shortcut to it. You have to actually get closer to the product. And if in a particular industry, if you're not able to get closer to the product, get as close to it as
Possible.
as possible. And if you have that as a clear goal, I'm quite confident that you will figure out a way to get to some acceptable version of how close to the product can you get. I think there's no substitute for that, because again, things don't translate well only on PowerPoint slides or on Zoom calls. So you will need to actually go spend that particular time. I think that's going to be like super critical for getting close to that. And second, in order to be able to develop tomorrow, I think you need to understand what you have today and what led to what you have today. So, like I said, there's a lot of stories.
Behind.
There's a lot of stories behind where things are. It's one thing to sit down and critique sort of what you have today, but I think the moment I go and put those engineers back in the shoes, saying, okay, what led us to this? What were the trade-offs that we had to do? Trade-off by definition may not be a bad thing, sort of. Right? Sometimes you cannot be all things to all people. So you have to become very clear about what will you do for a particular area, and you may have to double down upon that particular one. So I think it is important to really understand those areas, and there's no substitute for spending the time and knowing the stories, behind the scenes.
Yeah, no, of course, that makes us more richer and nuanced in our decision making, I'm sure, which is very important. So let's now talk about the overall ecosystem, the GCC ecosystem right now. Though a lot of leaders do not want to use that term anymore, GCC, but innovation centers or capability centers anyway. So we host one of the largest ecosystems globally of GCCs here, and here in Hyderabad, we've heard last year that every 3 days there were two GCCs opening a center here. So what's making us really unique, uh, and also what needs to be continued or to be adapted so that this journey continues from here on.
So number one, I think Hyderabad in general has been a welcoming city for us. But I would say even in India, from that standpoint, I think the GCCs have evolved over the years, and I think capabilities has matured. I really don't see too much talk kind of happening on the cost part of it. I think there's a lot more discussion on what kind of capabilities do we have. So in terms of what we want to develop sort of going forward and what's really helping us, I think there is more opportunity, and I think there's also more willingness in the GCCs today to really come together, especially if you are in areas where you're not directly competing with each other. I think people are a lot more willing to sit down and discuss and collaborate on really how do we drive this. The second part of it is, I think, our talent pool. I know there is a large number of people, but I think our talent agility is actually pretty high. So the question is, it's not just about what you bring in. The question is, once you bring a particular resource inside your GCC, the journey starts. It doesn't stop there, right?
Correct. Yeah. And it's then your responsibility.
Then you're responsible.
Yeah.
And I don't look at talent development as an HR function. I think it's basically all of our leadership, responsibilities. We all have a stake in making sure that we are doing our part so that our talent is appropriately positioned for tomorrow. Not just on technical skills, but on soft skills, on business exposure, on industry, on sort of the overall, the model and the ecosystem that you have. Because you're not only talking to people, within your particular function, you are sometimes talking to suppliers, sometimes talking to customers. I think that well-rounded approach, I think, becomes super critical. And I really see that maturing, and especially in certain industries where you've got critical mass and critical scale, that is exposing quite a bit. And if you can augment it with sort of hands-on experience, whether those are in the case of products or labs, etc., nothing like it. So I think this is really what's making us unique. I think there's this hunger that I see in our teams to learn, and there's also this willingness to challenge status quo, saying that, okay, if it has not been done before, let's see why can't we go drive and try to make something happen. And a lot of innovation, a lot of disruptive innovation kind of happens through that processing. Let's figure out a way to get this thing done.
No, absolutely right. So many GCC leaders talk about global roles moving into India. Has that been a trend at Career? And if so, then what does it signify from an organizational trust perspective, and also from you talked about nurturing talent. So leadership, if good leadership come to India, I'm sure that talent will also gain from that.
So two things. I mean, when you talk about GCC leadership and talk about leadership roles, I want to be a little bit broader here, because it is not just one person in a GCC. I mean, we've got, these are large organizations, you've got multiple teams and you've got multiple functions. And when you get a global role, it really means that particular discipline that you have, you're actually responsible for handling that discipline globally. And I think that therefore there is a lot of distributed ownership in that particular area. And in order to get that one done, you also need to know what's happening in other parts of the world. So while you can't just be consuming information or requirements that's kind of coming to you, you also have a role in sort of understanding and shaping what's going to happen tomorrow. I'm happy that over the last several years, we've been working towards it, but there's about 3 or 4 of our key leaders who have taken on global disciplines, from our GCC. So they've got responsibility and mandate towards doing work not only in a particular region, but across the particular globe. And this journey is not something that happens overnight, as we've discussed. So the way you expose our talent to different scenarios, different business environments, I think that's a multi-year or a multi-functional journey. One of the things that I would, and that I've been a proponent of, is it's absolutely okay for people to jump from one discipline to the other discipline. I think get that exposure, broaden your exposure. As you become specialists, obviously you'll deepen, But there's nothing wrong in understanding different ways of looking at the same particular problem. So I think that journey has to continue. And regardless of who you are as an employee, if you are early talent, or if you're a mid-level talent, or if you're a senior talent, uh, I think each of us has our learning opportunities. I learn so much from our early talent coming in every single day. I love to spend time with our engineering leadership program talent, because they are not afraid to ask questions. They will throw questions at you. They'll poke you
Right.
with their thoughts, and I think it keeps it fresh. So I think the world is changing quite rapidly, around us, and I think our talent also needs to do it. The main thing is, I think the managers and the people leaders need to really look at talent development as sort of their
Competence.
core responsibility also going forward. It's not something that's only for HR teams. And a lot of this growth also has to be orchestrated, sort of, right? So I think by design, so if somebody is there, look, this is a budding talent, what is the growth path? That I think that should become a two-way conversation. There is a responsibility on the individual. There is also a responsibility on us as a company to really work together, and how do we make this happen?
Yeah, true. And it becomes all the more important in an era where talent is becoming very scarce, it's competitive, and I'm sure that it's all the more difficult to win their trust and loyalty if you're not doing things like that. I would believe so.
No, I think you're right. I think, look, bringing in talent is sort of one part.
Yeah.
The moment somebody walks into the door, what do you do with the talent is now on us, right? So somebody has decided to move on. I think that seed must have been sown a long time ago. I'm talking sort of in general, right? So the thing is, for these global hubs, for example, we've got a global hub. Part of my responsibility is to create and drive those positive employee experiences locally, so that people or employees are more connected to what they do. So I think you have to really help make some of those connections so that they are a lot more invested in what the company is trying to do. They're a lot clearer about what is their role that they are playing in us fulfilling that particular journey. And I think we also need to understand that their aspirations will change over time. Their requirements will change over time. So I think the more transparent we are about these conversations, I think the better it is going to be, because it's look, we are in it for the long haul.
Right.
So it's okay. What you wanted yesterday may not be what you want today or tomorrow.
Yeah.
So how do we drive those employee experiences? I think matter. And a lot of times, we talk about processes and policies, and then you get the experience that you get. Frankly, we've tried to flip that thing around, saying that, look, what is the real employee experience that we want to drive? And what we have, is that really helping? We'll make sure that those are within process and policy. And I think we should always keep both ears open. Please ask the team, hey, we are doing something because we believe it's the right thing to do, but is that really working the way it is? That feedback loop back from the employees, I think becomes super critical in this day and age. Because again, you've got a diverse set of people, diverse set of requirements. Some of them could be common, but quite a few of them, may not necessarily be the same. So how do we really bring these different thought processes together? I think that's the magic, right, that you can create.
And also aspirations change over time, so we need to keep looking into whether we are at the on the right path or not. So final question, Nanda. Something that probably you believed about leadership 15 years back, 20 years back, but your idea about it has completely changed, or you wish you learned it much earlier in your career.
It's an interesting, interesting question. Look, I mean, I would say that over the years, right? I mean, I used to, if I went back to my previous avatar, I used to believe in a lot more data driven approach. I would go about finding data and then acting. I think over the years, I've become a lot more comfortable saying, hey, look, I know what's working and what's not working. So, if something inherently feels that it's the right thing to do,
Gut, if it
go ahead and do it. And I think part of it really came from experience. But I think part of it also came from, really sort of embracing that there could be multiple ways of
Right.
addressing something. And your way is not necessarily the right way. So I think that flexibility, I think has really, really helped me. And I think in a GCC, you do get to see so many different parts of the company, so many different functions. So I think that's a terrific learning experience. So I'm a lot more comfortable saying that, look, I'm a fundamentals guy. So as the fundamentals are strong, they said, okay, we can go down, and if good is not the enemy of best. So don't wait for something that is absolutely the best. If something is good, get started. Make things happen. I think that's the lesson I have learned, and I wish I had learned that lesson 20 years sooner also.
Definitely, as it is said, excellence over perfection is what makes keeps the clock ticking. Thank you so much, Nanda, for joining us. It was pleasure talking to you as always.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.